Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast, and I'm your host. My name is John Puma. You may know me from the Sake Notes, also from Reddit's r/sake community. Make it over to the Internet Sake Discord and come say hi to me sometime.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I am a sake samurai. I'm a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
So, Timothy, I think, Timothy, I don't think I've ever called you Timothy on the show before.
I like it. I like it.
Oh,
please.
Well,
yes.
Very formal. All right.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Sullivan. So,
I think we've been playing it a little safe lately with some of our sake picks, don't you? A little too mainstream. We don't want to become known as the squares of the sake world, do we?
Oh, Tim, wherever could you be going with this?
Yes. And one thing we haven't touched on a while is a really fun series we do, the Extreme Sake series.
Oh, my goodness.
Right?
It has been a while. We have not done the Extreme series in wow. It's been some time. It has definitely been some time.
Let's remind our listeners what some of the extremes are that we've tasted. We did extremely high alcohol, right? We did that one.
We did extremely high milling percentage.
Yes, we
meaning
did.
That, very barely milled.
Yes.
We've done high acidity.
Yes.
Yes. We've done extreme sake meter value in both directions.
Oh, yes. Super dry, super sweet.
Dry, super sweet.
Well, is there anything left? Are there any more extremes in the sake world?
I can name one.
I can name one too. So we're going to tackle another extreme sake.
Yes, we are. I think the people at home may be waiting with bated breath. Timothy, what is the extreme today?
Today's extreme is a type of sake known as Doburoku.
Yes, Doburoku. Now, I have some hands-on experience with Doburoku by virtue of the fact that Doburoku definitely overlaps with crazy style in this household. And so when we are overseas, where Doburoku is a little bit more common, Michelle will tend to have it. She wants to have big, chunky, weird stuff. She wants the unusual sake. This is an unusual sake. So that happens a lot.
So the first thing we know from your wife, Michelle, is that Doburoku falls into camp crazy style.
Definitely falls into camp crazy style.
Okay, so we're on the path to extreme already.
Yes, definitely. Yes. So, Tim, I know it's crazy style. To me, I look at it and it is extreme nigori in a way because it's big, chunky rice, milky, hazy. What's the story with this stuff, though? Why does it have its own name?
Yeah, well, Doburoku, if you look at it in the bottle, you're right. It does look like nigori. It's chunky. It's completely unfiltered. And one way that people define Doburoku is that it's often a type of home-brewed sake. Now, this does not legally qualify as premium Nihonshu or premium sake, and Doburoku is produced in a slightly different way from premium sake as well. It is fermented alcohol from rice, but the main big headline here is that Doburoku is actually, in most cases, illegal to brew in Japan because it is considered a rough and ready home brew style sake. So it is illegal. Okay. So are we breaking the law right now, John?
We're not making any, so no. So hang on a second. So it's illegal, but I see this stuff on shelves when I go to Japan, and now I'm seeing it on shelves in America from time to time. Now, I do know that home brewing in Japan is illegal.
Yes.
So this dovetails with that law, I imagine, in some way. So
absolutely.
What's there's details here that I'm missing. Definitely some fine-tuned details that I don't understand.
Well, yeah, it all goes back to money, of course, right?
Oh, yes. Money. You don't say.
Moolah, yes. So in the Meiji era, let's say 1868 and beyond, the government started to earn a lot of money from taxing the sale and production of sake. it was a major income source for the Japanese government. So they wanted to preserve this income source, and they didn't want people home brewing quick and easy sake, Doburoku style, in their homes. So they outlawed home brewing completely, and it still is on the books today. So you asked a very good question. If it's illegal, if Doburoku is illegal, how did you see it in Japan when you went? How can it be on store shelves, and how is it being exported to the US? So in the early 2000s, the Japanese government started passing laws that created special zones of Doburoku where this homebrew style sake could be produced legally for festivals.
But only in Doburoku zones.
Only in specially designated Doburoku zones. And the majority of these Doburoku zones are for festivals, Shinto rituals, events, matsuris, and different regions that specialize in Doburoku. So they said if you're making it for these certain reasons and it's going to be consumed locally, you can have a license to make this homebrew style Doburoku sake. So it is legal under certain circumstances. So you need a special license, and you need to get a specific designated permission to brew Doburoku. So it is legal, but only under certain circumstances.
So that's complicated. I guess when you're doing things with bureaucracy in Japan, there's probably a phased approach that you want to do. You can't just turn around and be like, all right, Doburoku's fine, homebrew is still not fine. So it's interesting. That's kind of like that they're playing around a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good. I remember I went to Japan once, and I went to this, I think it was in Gifu, and I went to this small little town. It was a little inn, and they said, please try our local sake. And it was a Doburoku. And I was like, what is this? How do they have it? I heard it was illegal, but now after I studied it a little more, I came to learn that they have these special designated zones and licenses so people can make it for local production, usually in tourist areas or connected to Shinto shrines and things like that.
Interesting. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if these modifications to the laws and these situations where people are able to make it and now export it all comes down to why it was originally taken out of the market, which is money. These breweries are going to sell it, and they want to get that tax income.
It's an interesting point, John. I think what's happened is that places like this small town in Gifu are now tourist destinations, and they use tourism as the driver now. So the government wants tourist money. So they allow Doburoku to be brewed to pull in the tourists. So you're right that.
And now it's a regular product, and now it's able to be exported to America.
I don't know much about the export rules, but I'm not asking any questions. That's all I'm saying.
You're just happy to see more variety.
Just happy to see more variety.
That's great. I love it. And that's one of the, I think we've talked about this on the show before. It's something I'm pretty sure that Michelle had originally said to me is she's happy when she tries a sake that she doesn't really enjoy, because it means that sake is bigger than any one person's taste, and that there's sake for everybody. And so it's the idea that this is a sake that's produced and people are buying and it's being exported and people are buying it in America and drinking it, means that it's there for somebody and doesn't have to be me. It doesn't need to be her. It just needs it's somebody's going to find their sake, because sake is so broad.
So the next time I taste a disgusting sake, I'll rejoice for that person who's going to love it, even though I hate it.
If it's a sake where you recognize the craft, but it's just not your thing.
Yeah. Got it.
So we touched on the idea this does look in the bottle a lot like nigori, a lot like a really big, chunky nigori. And we had an episode where we talked about nigori, and one of the things that came out of that episode was you telling me two things. Number one, never ever call it unfiltered. Two, there's not really laws about how much stuff needs to be in the nigori for it to be a nigori. And that there's some places will choose to say usu nigori when it's very light. Some places will just say nigori. But the amount of particulate that's in there is not really part of the name. I guess no rules that support that. This Doburoku almost certainly has massive amounts of stuff in it. So what makes it different from nigori then?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Nigori is a type of sake Nihonshu, and the rules, as we talked about in our Nigori episode, is that to be legally sold as sake, it has to go through a press of some kind. It has to be pressed. And Nigori can go through a coarse press, but it still has to go through a pressing shibori stage of some kind.
Sure.
That is what the law says. Now, Doburoku is a different animal. It looks like a chunky nigori in the bottle, but there's two major differences. One is that there is no pressing of any kind. This is drinking the mash. So this is like you just put the ingredients into a clay pot and you ferment them. The other difference is that nigori, if it's a traditional Nihonshu sake, is going to have a fermentation starter, and it's going to be, 25 to 30 days of fermentation, and you build up the yeast in the shubo first and all this stuff. But with Doburoku, this is a rough style homebrew. So what they do is they take the 4 ingredients, they dump them into a container, and they ferment for about 10 days. And the alcohol percentage is much lower with Doburoku because you don't have these longer fermentation times. So the Doburoku we're tasting today is 6% alcohol. Really low. Another extreme. But that is one of the major differences. This is a homebrew, rough and ready style of production where you just mix the ingredients together and you ferment for a much shorter amount of time. And a nigori is a classic Nihonshu or sake where you do a fermentation starter, a full building up of the mash, and it must pass through a press of some kind in order to be sold as sake. So nigori and Doburoku look alike in the bottle, but they're very different as far as production and regulations.
All right. So can we call this one unfiltered?
We can call this one unfiltered, capital U.
All right. So whenever somebody says they like unfiltered sake, I'm going to be like, so you like Doburoku?
Yes.
And they're going to go, what's that? And I'm going to push them. I'm going to point them to this episode.
Yes, this is truly unfiltered. It's like drinking right out of the tank.
Excellent.
Bring your fork.
Well, extreme.
Extreme. Yeah. So you've tasted Doburoku before. I have as well. But we should probably let our listeners in on what they can expect in general from Doburoku. We know it's low alcohol. We know it's not pressed in any way. We know it's like drinking out of the mash tank. So what kind of flavors do you remember from your Doburoku experience?
A little on the sweeter side is what I remember.
Definitely.
And I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have a ton of it. But the sweeter side, I think I remember some a little more lactic qualities on occasion.
Excellent. Yep.
But yeah. And of course you can't possibly miss the texture because of all those chunks in there.
Yeah. You definitely want to look for sweetness because, again, the fermentation time is shorter, so you're going to have a little lower alcohol, a little more residual sugar. What you mentioned about lactic is right on the money. It's like it's like a yogurty style drink. That's very, very common, and the texture is really important. It's like chunky, thick, really coats the glass. And some people go crazy for it. Some people don't like it as much, but those are kind of what you can generally expect from Doburoku, I think.
Interesting. It's definitely, it is definitely extreme. It belongs in this series. That's for sure.
Yeah. So should we introduce the sake we're going to be tasting today?
I think that would be fun. I think we should. So this brand, we've actually had this brand on the show before. It's Niwa no Uguesu. More to the point, we've had the brewer of this brand on the show before, long ago.
Yes, Yamaguchi-san.
In episode number 49, we actually interviewed Yamaguchi-san from Niwa no Uguesu. And it was a fun time. I had a good time having him on the show. His insights about making sake in Fukuoka were a lot of fun. It's Niwa no Uguesu from Yamaguchi Shuzo over in Fukuoka. The rice variety here is Yume Ikon. The alcohol percentage, Tim, as you mentioned earlier, is 6. So 6%, a very low alcohol in that Doburoku. The rice milling percentage that's remaining is 60%. The sake meter value, oh goodness,
Come on,
is
you can do
extreme.
it. You can do it.
It's extreme. Is minus 74. That sounds illegal. And the acidity is 4. Oh my god,
4.
This is so weird.
4 plus, yeah. So
this is a weird beverage that we're going to be having.
Yeah. So I do happen to know people may be thinking, well, is this brewery in one of those Doburoku zones, or what's the story? I do happen to know from my research that Yamaguchi Shuzo does have a Doburoku and a standard sake license. So they're permitted to produce premium standard sake and also Doburoku. So that's how we're able to get this really unique sake from Niwa no Uguisu.
So they're doing it as kind of a separate license. That's interesting. That's a good way to
they have
do
both.
it.
They have both licenses, which is
Right.
pretty rare. You don't see a lot of commercial breweries producing Doburoku, like we mentioned before. It's a lot of small town inns or Shinto shrines or things like that, or festival locations that are producing Doburoku. But Niwa no Uguisu, Yamaguchi Shuzo, and Fukuoka, they are producing this really great Doburoku that we can try together. So should we get it open and get it in the glass?
I think we should.
All right.
No time like the present.
Now, John, before we open, I'm going to agitate my bottle. Gently agitate my bottle.
Gently agitate. Do not shake. Do not shake it.
Okay. Okay, I've got mine in the glass.
Okay.
You poured? Okay.
I'm going to need to power wash this glass after we're done.
Now,
there's a lot of stuff in here.
Yes, so we have to paint a picture here. So we're both drinking out of clear wine glasses,
Yes, we
and
are.
the Doburoku is pearlescent, cloudy white, and anywhere it touches, it leaves a trail of rice particles on the side of the glass. So it's extremely coating. It looks very chunky and completely opaque.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
And when you look, if you tilt the glass a little and look onto the surface of the sake, it almost looks pockmarked because of all the little rice chunks that are floating on the surface. So it's looks like a super chunky style. And let's give it a smell and see what's up with the aroma here.
All right. It is a lot.
There's a lot going on.
Yes.
I mean, it smells like mochi rice. It smells ricey primarily, and it also smells yogurty. I think there's a little yeasty quality.
Yogurty is definitely the first thing that I noticed, for certain. And the rice is in there. I believe to me it's overshadowed so much by that yogurt aroma, that lactic quality.
Yeah, this smell also reminds me a little bit of like a pina colada, like almost coconutty in a way,
I see where
like
you're
a
going
little
with that.
yogurty, yeasty pina colada aroma. I thought when we talked about the sweetness, that this is an SMV minus 74, which is a indication of the density of the sake. So this is much more dense than water. And usually when things get that sweet, you expect a lot of fruity expression. And on the aroma, there's really not that much fruit at all. There's maybe a hint of something here or there, but it's really pronounced rice, yeast, and dairy notes on the nose.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's give this a taste. I'm ready. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's chunky. It's chunky.
It is. It's like having a sake smoothie in a way, but
It's
in a
like-
different way than you'd get if you go to the one cup shop that we talked about in Ebisu called Buri. Different kind of sake smoothie. Over there, they're freezing the sake. This is just like when I say smoothie, I'm thinking more like the fruit juice smoothies, like where they take like your bunch of fruits and they put them in a blender and then you drink that and you're getting you can taste the fibers of the fruit in it. This is like that.
When the sake passes over your lips, you feel little chunks of rice. Like
You do.
It's chunky. It's very unusual because normally any nigori you have is not going to have this size chunk in it. So it's a little unusual. I'm not used to it yet. And
It's
it
definitely unusual.
And as far as the flavor goes, it has a sourness to it. Like the acidity is 4.0 plus. Some sites listed a little bit higher than 4.0, but there's a sourness that gives you that real yogurt feeling. Like the way yogurt can be sour. It has that taste for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I definitely get that from here. I haven't had yogurt in a really long time. So that reminds me, I haven't had this eating yogurt isn't, there's a uniqueness to that experience, I think.
Yeah. Have you ever had amazake before, John?
Once or twice.
Okay. For our listeners, amazake there's a few different ways to make it, but the way I'm thinking of is a non-alcoholic way of making, basically you start the sake fermentation process and you just never add yeast. So you break down rice using koji and then you stop. And you get this sweet, chunky rice drink. And this the texture reminds me of that, amazake. But the alcohol and the fermentation bring in a sourness to Doburoku that you don't get with amazake. Amazake is very sweet and ricey. And this has alcohol and it has high acidity from the fermentation process. So
right.
It's very different. It's interesting. Like the texture reminds me of that, but the finished product is very different. This is much more complex and much more sour than you're going to get with something like an amazake.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, it does remind me of almost, and this is not a put down on it. It reminds me almost like of a sour amazake.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. I get that when you say that. I'm like, all right. Yeah. It's amazake plus a little bit of sourness, a little touch more lactic. Totally.
Yeah. So there's a hint of tartness. There's the riciness is still there. But again, for me, those dairy notes really kind of come forward. There's a little bit of yeastiness. There's a little bit of sourness, dairy, cream, and especially yogurt flavors kind of predominate for me. But this is completely free of lactose. So if there's any lactose intolerant listeners who are looking for
or
a yogurty drink,
it does remind me a lot of a lot of things with lactose, and that immediately puts me on alert because I am lactose intolerant. But it doesn't have any of the actual lactose that's going to ruin my day. Good.
I think it is fair to say that this sake is definitely extreme.
Yes.
Correct.
And I'll say it is not only extreme in its look and its texture. I want to say that the flavor is also very extreme. It is every definition that we've had. When we've discussed extreme sake in this series, I feel like at the end of the day, this is the poster child. It's got all the things.
Right? We got super low alcohol. We have super low SMV. We have really high acidity. And we have funky flavors. It's the whole package. You're right. It's the poster child for extreme.
Perhaps the most extreme we've had on the show because it's in so many different ways.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a final question here, John, before we wrap up. I know that this is more my Shell's jam than yours as far as what she might like to drink for fun. But do you see a way of incorporating Doburoku into your sake life, or is this something that's just too extreme for you?
It's too extreme for me, and I've tried. I've tried a couple of times to try to get into it. It's just not my style. And, as we said earlier, best thing about sake, there's something out there for everybody.
Yes. There's a lid for every pot.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you, Tim?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm with you, John. Honestly, this is not generally my cup of tea. I can taste it, study it, appreciate it, and this is not my everyday drinking sake, I'm afraid. The texture is a little bit pushing me over the edge, I think.
Yeah, I think that, again, I'm already not a fan of things that are very lactic. And I'm not a big chunky nigori guy. So you're introducing something that raises alarms subconsciously for me when I'm sipping on it because of that sour yogurt sensation.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard for me to relax and enjoy it the way I would want to.
Well, to be fair, we do have to spotlight the other side of the argument, which is there are Doburoku lover groups in Japan.
Really?
Yes. So groups. And there are people who are designated Doburoku ambassadors as well. So even though it may not be our cup of tea as our daily drink, I think that for people who like the sweeter, lower alcohol side and are, into a more funky flavor in their sake, I think that there are people and groups who are super into Doburoku. So that's something to keep in mind too. Doburoku lovers, I'm sure they have t-shirts and tote bags and everything.
I hope they do. I actually think I know a couple of these Doburoku ambassadors, actually.
They could be your friends. You never know. Some of my best friends are Doburoku lovers.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, John, this was exciting. It was fun to get back on the high wire and taste some extreme sake with you. I think we landed the plane and we got exposure to some funky sake today, and it's always good. Whether you end up loving it or not, it's always good to taste something new. Don't you agree?
It is. Again, we've got this in the house now. You know who's going to be drinking this bottle. The rest of this bottle is going to, Michelle's going to be having a great time with it. Maybe she'll have some friends over that will blast with it. Me, I'll probably have a couple of sips with her, but I've got my fruity stuff over there to sip.
All right. Well, so great to taste with you. And I want to say a thank you as well to all our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do hope that you're enjoying Sake Revolution. If you'd like to support our show, the best way to do that now is to join our community on Patreon. We're a listener-supported show. And if you'd like to learn more, please visit patreon.com/sakerevolution to sign up to support us.
And another great way to support us would be going to your podcast platform of choice. We got Stitcher, you've got your Apple Podcasts and others out there. Leave a review and tell people what you think of our show. And that's going to kind of drive the needle a little bit, let people know that Sake Revolution is out there. When people are looking for podcasts about sake, they'll point them in our direction, hopefully. And that does help us out a lot. Also, do the other stuff of telling your friends, family, all that kind of thing. So on that note, please grab a glass of something very chunky. And remember to keep drinking Doburoku and Kanpai.